Hello, dear friends, and thanks for tuning in to Think with Armel, episode 1. I had a conversation with Dr. Anita and Diop. It was a very fascinating conversation. And the background, let me give a little bit of the background real quick. So I was finding myself having a conversation with some friends, and we're talking about our local languages in Cameroon, and everybody, it's kind of common knowledge that everybody from Cameroon and Africa in general speaks two, three, four languages just off the top, and we tend to be polyglots, right? And of course, that's an asset. But then we were trying to figure out why that was the case in the first place, because there are arguments to be made, you know, as to whether having multiple languages is an asset or maybe it's not so much of an asset, maybe it's a disadvantage. Anyways, so I wanted to speak to somebody that would be somewhat of an expert in the subject. And so I started Googling around. I just wanted to speak to somebody that had the expertise to at least give us some level of understanding as to why this is the case. Or if not why, at least how. Is there a pattern? Is there some kind of a way to characterize those different languages? How to identify them? And is there any type of scientific explanation that would shed some light around our different languages? And so I ended up, finding Professor Anita Diop, and this is her Facebook page, as you can see. She's Mafo. Her Highness is a title that's given to the kingship title that's given to queens and um, princesses back in Africa. Even from my tribe, there are people that are Mafo from my tribe. Anyways, so Professor Anita M. Diop, she's the director of the African Roots and Heritage Foundation. And what is interesting, a couple of things that I took from our conversation is the fact that at 6 years old, she had this powerful dream that basically told her that she was the spirit of Africa and she had to bring the children of Africa together. That's kind of what set her off on this journey. And then when she, was in the university, she ended up fallen in love with history and African history. And so she's a professor of history. She's also a photographer, she's a producer, and I found out some really, really interesting things. And so she has dedicated her life to, connecting the children of Africa that were whether born or in Africa or outside of Africa, but she basically dedicated her life to connecting the children of Africa back to Africa. And a lot of this work is through her foundation, African Roots and Heritage Foundation. Um, and this eventually culminated in her appointment as the representative of the diaspora to the African Union as the representative of the sixth region. For those of you that don't know, the African Union has divided Africa into 5 regions, so into 6 regions actually. So Africa, as you can visualize Africa on a map, so that the landmass itself was divided into 5 regions, North, South, Central, North Sahara, South Sahara, and so on and so forth. And then there's a sixth region that's basically represented by all the children of Africa that are living outside of the continent. That means people like myself, people like herself. And if you're African born or you are of Africa, you are an African descent living outside of Africa, you technically belong to the sixth region of Africa, and she's the representative of that region. So we discussed really, we talked a lot about languages. Um, I brought up Pidgin English because that's a quite a unique language from Cameroon, and every African country kind of have their own version of Pidgin English. And we talked about the association of languages um, from a scientific perspective, and we touched a little bit on everything. But I really, really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope you do too. So, dear friends, this is my conversation with Dr. Anita N. Diop, and I hope that you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. Thank you.
Because you're already getting into the weeds of it. You don't mind. So Thank you for joining the call, Doctor. It's actually an honor to speak with you today. And maybe I should give you a background as to how I ended up having to reach out to you. So I found myself having some conversations with some friends, and I was wondering, it really came down to the languages. I'm obviously from Cameroon, but I was wondering how we ended up in a situation where we have so many different tribes. Like my mama, she probably speaks 4 or 5 different tongues. I barely speak my own as is, but I was wondering why we had so many different languages. What was the reason for that? I think it's very interesting. It's an asset, it's a rich culture, but I still was left with a question as to wondering how exactly did we end up, because I'm looking at America and I don't see different tribes and different villages. It seems to be an African thing. And I couldn't help but wonder, how did we end up with, we have the Basas here, we have the Bamilikis, and even within those groups, there are subgroups. Like I'm from Bayangam, you have people from Batufam, you have people from Bafusam. And I'm like, and I was just wondering, is that something that we just kind of evolved as a culture, or is there something else? Is there a reason why we have so many different languages? I enjoy all the foods, but I don't know if I like the fact that I can't understand if somebody, like I have friends here in Oklahoma that are from Bali, for instance. When they speak their dialect, I have no idea what they're saying. But we're basically from the same place. We're all from Cameroon,
Okay.
but everybody's speaking a different language. I'm not sure if that's, sometimes it almost feels as though that's a disadvantage in some ways, but it's at the same time it's a beautiful thing. It's a rich culture, and that's kind of what got me into it. And so I was looking around for anybody that I could talk to that could help, maybe make sense of this whole cultural uniqueness that we have in Africa. And that's how I ended up finding you on the internet. And I landed on the Facebook page. I was able to go to the website and look you up. And so I like to give a befitting introduction. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I did a little bit of research, and I found out that you are the director of the short name is ARHF, right? African Roots and Heritage Foundation.
That is
Uh,
correct.
and you did say you just retired, but I think up until your retirement, you were a professor at Hopkins Community College.
Hopkinsville Community College. That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And then you were also an advisor to the Minority Students Union and to the History Club as well. Is that
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And I found some interesting things. You're a photographer as well. You take pictures. And
Yes.
so you had Eyes of the African Princess at the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History. And you're also a producer, because it said that you produced a short film called Concrete Roses.
Yes, that's correct.
Well, I was very, 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 very interesting. So if you don't mind giving me a little bit of background about your story, how you were raised, how did you end up doing what you're doing today?
Okay. Um, I am Professor Anita and Diop. I was born and raised in Detroit, Michigan. And at the tender age of 6 years old, I had a vision of being in a stadium filled with thousands upon thousands of African people. And what was so unique was the stadium was totally filled. The whole field was covered, the stands were covered, and it was just as many people outside the stadium as it was inside the stadium. And I seen tall and short and dark and light and fat and all types of kings and chiefs and rulers. And the ruler, this seemed to be the paramount ruler. He asked me, he said, "Do you know who you are?" I said, "Yes, I am Anita Marie." And he said, "No." He said, "That's the name that your mother has given you. But do you know who you are?" And you know, I didn't know. And he said, "You are the spirit of Africa.
Oh,
And it
wow.
is your job to bring the people together." And I woke up out of the dream and went on with life because I was only 6 years old when I had that dream. But when I went to college, I did not have an idea of what I wanted to study. And an advisor reached out to me and said, well, why don't you just take this African Studies class, an intro to African Studies class? And within the first hour of being in that class, I understood what my major would be. So I majored in African Studies and then went on and took my advanced degrees in African and African American history with a specialization in the culture and the arts. So you mentioned about the photography. My very first trip was in 1997, where we visited 5 countries. And
Wow.
before I went on the trip, my grandmother said, I'm too old. I always wanted to go to Africa. She said, but I want to be able to see Africa through your eyes.
Wow.
And so I went out and bought a camera because I knew nothing about photography. And I think I bought 100 rolls of film, and that was 100 rolls of blurred film.
Oh, that was when they still had the films, not the digital cameras we have
Yeah,
today.
it was
Oh, okay.
35 millimeter at that time. That was 1997, probably before you were born.
No, that was actually what 3, 4 years. I was born in 93.
Okay, okay, so you're around. Okay,
I
so
was around.
anyway, I taught myself how to use the camera and how to get sharp focus. And so when we went to the 5 different countries, which were Togo, Gambia, Senegal, Benin, and South Africa, and Ghana, if I didn't mention Ghana.
Yeah.
And I I tried to capture as much as I could to tell the story. And so when I got back to the US, I showed my professor these pictures, and they were like, wow, you need to put these up in a museum. And they went ahead that December and put a display on at the university. And I had contacted the museum and I showed them my work, and they did my exhibit, which was called Eyes of the African Princess. And so from there, I guess I became an artist. I never think of myself as an artist. I think of myself as a historian, because
Yeah.
historians gather data, and part
Right.
of gathering data is the photography. But the museum said that of all the exhibits that they had over the years, that I fit into the top 10% of the
Oh, wow.
artists
Oh,
that
wow.
exhibit. So from
That's
there,
amazing.
I began to take the exhibit to many other museums, schools, colleges, government buildings, and so forth and so on. So the
Wow.
short answer to what I do, um, I love everything African, and currently I'm serving as the representative of the 6th region to the African Union, to represent all those outside of the continent, because the continent is split into 5 regions, and the 6th region
It's
represent
outside
those
Africa's.
outside. And so I am an officially appointed representative to the African Union for the 6th region.
That's
And
very interesting. I didn't know that, but I knew about this whole 6 region thing. And at some point last year, I was actually looking into, because I understand that I think the HQ is in Addis Ababa, which would be in Ethiopia, I believe.
Ethiopia.
So
Mhm.
yes, so I do understand that for some members of the diaspora that are quote unquote stateless, they also provide like some type of passport to people. Let's say if you were born here, you're Black, and you want to return to Africa, do they have like program, a specific program designed to
They're
help?
working on it. They're working
Okay.
on it. The issue that we have with the residents of the US is that we are people within a sovereign nation.
Right.
So we don't
Technically,
have
yes.
the legal boundaries to set such a thing up.
Mm.
Now, like Jamaica or Bahamas or Colombia, Brazil, because they're sovereign nations, they have a different legal system to enter into partnerships with the AU to do such a thing. So that's something
Oh,
that's
I see.
working on, that is very much desired amongst us, to be able to have a passport to say that we're part of Africa, we're from Africa. But several different countries offer different programs to allow those of the diaspora to either be given land or to purchase land at a reduced cost as
To help
part of
to
a
help pull you back.
reparations package or acknowledgement of your family used to have land here. And when you left, so other people took over your land. And that's what happened in my case in Cameroon. I understand that there is a program, but just my presence and the working that I have done in Cameroon, different kingdoms have decided to gift me land, which I shortly should have the title to. And with that
That's
land,
in Yaoundé, Cameroon, or is it in a different
yes,
part of the
well,
country?
in Swa,
And so, okay,
in the kingdom of Oka,
okay.
we will be building the new African Thought Youth Training Institute on that
Oh,
land.
wow.
Mhm.
That's interesting. And are those the people that speak the Fang language, or is it let me see. So Swa, Ekoa, let me see. What language do they speak in that specific area? Is it Fang?
I'm not sure, but
I think
like
it's
they would say Bumu and Carry for hello. So I don't know.
yeah, that sounds like Fang. I think it's Fang. Around the southern side of Cameroon, central southern side of the country. I think that would be the Fang language, which is very similar to the Bulu language. They have a lot of kind of similarities. There are kind of words that cross over between different tribes, but majority of the context of the language is really different. But that's
Now you,
interesting. I didn't know about that.
yeah. Now you asked the question about why is there so many different languages?
Yeah.
The simple answer is that there's so many ethnic groups, and each ethnic group has its own DNA code, and each DNA code has a different language. That's the simple answer.
Oh, wow. I never thought about it like
So,
that.
yeah,
Well,
so what you see is multiple races, though all of the races are Black, um, in skin color or Negroid in
right.
orientation, they serve as a different race. And that was one
So
of the
from
first
looking at it
things.
from like a DNA perspective, the DNA of somebody, so there's more difference between the DNA of somebody that's from Yaoundé as compared to somebody from, I don't know, Bafoussam, for instance, versus the DNA between somebody from Cameroon and say China. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes, yes. So what we have is this. Have you heard of the Eve gene?
Yes, yes, I have. I've
Okay.
heard of the EFG.
I found myself as Bassa in Cameroon, and of that, I have the Eve gene. And what that means is that Bassa were probably some of the original people. And from those people came other people, which had a different DNA code. Okay. So
Okay.
it's said that the Eve gene has all the codes of the world, of every people in the world, of every race in the world. So technically, I have the ability to push out different races from my gene pool. So again, in the simplest terms, with the DNA, say with the people, the Bassa people are different from the Tikar people,
Right,
or
right.
the people from the Bamileke.
Yes.
It is different codes. So, which means it's a different
and
people,
this
a
is very
different
interesting.
race.
I never thought about the fact that our DNAs could be that different. But I
Yes.
mean, I clearly see the different cultures, the language, the clothing, the traditional dances, and everything is really different. But it never crossed my mind that maybe their DNAs are just that different at the same time. I
Yes.
never had thought about that idea, but
Yes.
that's an interesting idea. Okay.
And then another thing, what I've learned in my research is that each ethnic group has a musical beat or rhythm that's
I kind of know
different
that
from the
intuitively. You say the way you say it makes sense, but I've never put it like that. But yes, that makes perfect sense to me. Every group literally they have a different type of song or type of rhythms they use in their different cultural. That is very true. Yeah, that's something I just observed growing up.
And so that's also DNA coded. I had an opportunity to sit under this professor in Ghana, and he said that with his studies of music and musical patterns, when he studies the patterns in Africa and then look at the musicians in America, he can tell where that person originated from based upon his musical beat and the way he composes music.
So he will listen to Alicia Keys and tell us where she's likely from in Africa?
Yes, yes, yes.
What?
Because these are all DNA thumbprints. These are just like your thumbprint when wherever you leave it, it's going to be what it is.
Yeah, you can't
It's not
change.
really going to
Yeah.
change. So my nose this comes from Senegal. Okay. My eyes come from Angola, and it's just that simple. Like I told you, my DNA has genes in every part. But it was a person very close and dear to me. They're from Senegal, and we have the exact same nose. You can take my nose off and put on their face and take their nose off, and nobody would know that it's been
The difference.
switched. And
Wow.
then my eyes, I recognize my eyes in Angola. There was a young man that I met, and I sent a picture home to my mother. I said, Mama, I said, who does this person look like? This person just looks like somebody so familiar to me, but I can't place it, right? And she said, he looks like your father when he was his age. And then I said, oh my God. That was it. And he actually had the eyes of my cousin, where we had this on my father's side of the family. And when I looked, because my family had a very distinctive eyes, but we have these eyes, and these eyes are from Angola. I swear on that. It's just so.
And what's the name of the professor you said could listen to somebody and tell where they're from?
In Ghana, I will have to look a name up. I can't
Wow.
remember.
That is insane. I never considered that. That is crazy.
And there's a lot of ways outside of DNA that can be told. I talked with a gentleman from Nigeria, and he was telling me of another way that they can tell beyond the physical appearance through a spiritual way. And he didn't explain it because he wasn't a practitioner of it, but he was saying that there were ways that it can be really discovered. And one other way, which is the lost way, I had a conversation with a person from Cameroon, and one day her light bulb just went on, and she said, wow. She said, slavery was a very evil institution. She said, because if you only knew your name, you would know exactly where to go back to find your family.
That is very true. That is correct. If you
And
tell me
so,
your name, I can tell you exactly where you come from, Cameroon. It
yes.
doesn't
And
matter.
she said, and you all just don't know your name. We don't. We have
And
no.
there's something interesting that I didn't realize that it was interesting until I was speaking about it with my wife. I told her that when I see an African, I could literally tell you where he comes from. It gets even better. Like within Cameroon, if I see anybody in Cameroon, I could literally tell you what tribe they belong to.
Mhm.
I've never met this person. I could just look at you, and I couldn't tell you how I do it, but I have like a 100% accuracy. Like I could look at you and tell you. It's just something like if you see somebody from Bamenda, I can tell you he's from. If I see somebody from Douala, I know. I just know. I don't know how.
Yes.
So,
It's your environment. And that's the thing that's the level that I want to get to. I want to be able to recognize who you are, where you're from, and make the difference. Because in America, we're all just Black people.
right.
Slavery took away our individual autonomy.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, as a historian, I want to give us back our autonomy, so we know exactly which people we come from. After I was in Cameroon and I would tell people I'm from Basso, they like, yes, you had a personality of a Basso woman. And I'm like, well, what is that personality? They say, you're just it. That's all. And I'm like, but tell me the personality, because from from my perspective, I'm just me. So
Yeah.
tell me.
They have a personality as well. Because I know exactly what they're talking about.
Okay, well, tell me. Tell me.
It's just certain things like um it's how do I put it? Like there tends to be this idea that Bassa women are fiercer. They are more like how do I what am I looking for? It's like they kind of have somewhat of a both the men and the men, well, the men is a little bit different, but with the women, they are very fierce, very outgoing, kind of sort of liberal, so to speak. But you can just tell they have this character trait that when you meet a Bassa woman, even if you didn't know, she interact with her for a few minutes, you're like, it's very likely that she's from that tribe. I, that's the best. I guess I didn't. I wish I could help, but and I agree that they have there's a personality trait that they have, which is very just like I could say the same about Bamenda women. I could say the same about like Bakosi, these different tribes. You can just tell that certain things they have mannerisms, the kind of things that they do, how they speak, their personality. It's a thing, but I don't even know how to put it in words, I guess. But that's very true. There's a type, there's a personality trait that they do have. Yeah,
Mhm. Yeah.
very interesting. Well, so looking at what the next the follow-up from that first question would be we grew up so growing up in Cameroon, there's this language, it's called Pidgin English. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's like a mixture of
Yes.
English and local language and French and dialect. And it kind of evolves. It's like an urban thing, it evolves over time. I've been away for so long and I'm sure that maybe if I go back, the pidgin they speak today might not be exactly the pidgin I left whenever I was speaking when I left Cameroon. So and I also do remember that in school, right, in primary school and secondary school, they used to punish us for speaking pidgin. So it was never encouraged. So if you spoke pidgin, you basically get punished. There were times where they would hang an armboard over your neck and say pigeon box. So everybody was against pigeon, basically. All our teachers and at home, they will tell you. But the funny thing is that at the same time, that pigeon language is what everybody speaks everywhere around you. Market, the streets, the taxis, the bikes. And a few years back, I came to the conclusion that I think they were wrong for that. Now, I'm not sure how familiar you are with the whole pigeon thing, but do you think that the fact that Pidgin is such a universal language around the country, because sometimes people could get divided along, cultural lines, be it French, English, or along the tribal lines. I tend to see Pidgin as something that brings us together. That's one thing. But the second thing is I tend to think that the fact that we're being punished for speaking Pidgin, or it was being shunned while we were growing up in school, kind of stems from colonialism. And the reason I say that is because I think that the colonial masters at the time didn't want us to speak a language that they do not understand, right? So they wanted you to speak either French or English, which is why that's the formal language of the country today. And they just passed that mentality down, but it seems as though our teachers never took the time to even question why should we even punish these kids for speaking Pidgin? It just kind of dawned on me, like, why is Pidgin not okay? Why was it never okay? I'm even sure today, if you go to Cameroonian schools today, speaking Pidgin is kind of like looked down upon and shunned. So what's your take on this Pidgin language thing?
Or what they call Camp Francais.
Yeah, Anglais is like another version of, it's actually a different version of Pidgin. It's like the French version, which is a mixture of English, French, and some dialects. Yes.
Okay.
Anglais
Well,
Pidgin.
It is definitely from colonial rule. And the colonizer did want to be able to understand all communications going forward. That was a control measure. Going forward, as you say, it's a language that's used with the common people as well as the educated people. I'm for getting rid of all of that. And the reason is because we're in the Africana Renaissance, and we should take time to learn and re-erect our own languages and make our own language the official language, removing the colonizer's language. Because I, being born here, I only speak English. I've learned other languages because I need to. And one of the things that I can say that when I first came to Africa in 1997, everybody spoke 3 or 4 different languages to get along in their community. From ethnic group to ethnic group, people would speak those languages, and those are called cross-border languages. Okay. So for Cameroon to have this civil uprising because my colonizer speaks English. No, my colonizer speaks French. So we're going to fight each other. That's totally absurd. All right. So where do you bring your own power? See, there's power in languages. There's power, and even people that do speak their native language, they will tell you there's words that English or French cannot even express.
That is very true. In my language too, there's a lot of words that I could only kind of try to give you context. Yeah.
Yeah, it cannot express. So we have to utilize what our creator gave us, and that's the power to speak our own language. And it's okay to know 3 or 4 different languages. That makes you what they call a polyglot, but it allows for trade. As you know, the language of Kiswahili was a cross-border language. It's a mixture of the local languages and Arabic for the purposes of trade. And yet it has grown so wide that it covers East Africa, some parts of Central Africa, and is now a working language in the AU. It's the actual first African language that's the official language. So they're working on other languages as well as the Kiswahili to make it an official language of the AU. But right now it is at least a working language in the AU. So
yeah, that's
so I'm a advocate for speaking your native language. Each year, I served on the African Languages Week Coordinating Committee. This is my 3rd season. being appointed to that position representing the 6th region. And one of the things that I do is go into the various kingdoms and ask them to participate in celebrating African Languages Week, which is now February 21st through the 28th. And also in America, I contact the various African associations as well as the African American organizations to celebrate African Languages Week during Black History Month, which is February, which I'm sure you're aware of. And so for the African American community, I suggest that they learn Kiswahili because Kwanzaa, which is an African American holiday, features the language of Kiswahili. Several schools teach Kiswahili, and then there's Yoruba and Zulu and other languages that are becoming prominent in the Americas. Learn something. If you have done your DNA test, I ask the people, find out. If you can find out the country, at least find the language in the country. If you can find out the actual ethnic group, find out how to say hello in your ethnic group. And I charge all Africans to speak their native language, especially if they're in the company of African Americans. And it's for this cause. When you speak your native language, we in the diaspora get to hear the voices of our ancestors.
Wow, that's deep. I try to speak the language to my son, and I think because my wife is from here, she doesn't speak anything other than English. But I think the only language that she tends to kind of pick up on real quick would be the pidgin English. French is a little bit more cumbersome, which I understand, but I try to speak the language as much as I can. And to be completely honest, I'm not the most proficient at speaking my language, but amongst my siblings, I like to think I'm the best.
Okay.
I speak it fairly well, But I wish, because when I find myself amongst, like, when I remember back home, when I would go to the village, sometimes even when they speak, they're so advanced that I'm kind of lagging behind. Like, they'll speak and they'll keep going, and I'm like, okay, this is what that means, and I'm slowly trying to catch up. But basically being exposed to the language, more often you're exposed to it, I think the better you understand it and the more familiar, obviously, you become with it. So that's very, very interesting. So let's pivot a little bit and talk about your ARHF Foundation. Now, you founded this African, Roots and Heritage
Foundation.
Yeah, with a friend of yours. Who is this Edith person, and what is your relationship to her? Or was 2013, I believe. So let me check my notes here. So it was founded in 2013 by yourself and somebody else, right? So could you tell us a story of how you decided to start the ARHF?
Okay. We started in 2006. I moved to Columbus, Ohio. And one of the things that I noticed immediately about Columbus, Ohio is that I was working for the county, and there were 7 different African ethnic groups as my coworkers. I never experienced that before. When you go to the grocery store, you see somebody from Somalia, Eritrea, Togo, Ghana, South Africa. You go to the gas station to pump your gas, and you see someone from Senegal. And so I was immersed in a whole different world from where I grew up. And so she and I said, well, you know what? We have all these Africans here. And she did some research and found out that of the 50 some odd countries in Africa, 35 of those nations were represented with populations of 10,000 people or more in the
In
city of
Columbus?
Columbus. Yes.
Oh, wow.
So we said, well, we have to have a festival. We have to bring the African population together with the African American population, since we're here and they're there. Because what we notice is that the Nigerians will live up in the north, the Kenyans will live in the east, and the Somalians will live in the south. So they were,
Interesting.
segregated. And
Okay.
then, the African Americans are just like kind of all over. So we thought we would have the Black Cultural Festival. So we
Oh,
got
wow.
together, we planned, and we went out and met the African Communities Association presidents and so forth and so on, and told them our idea. And they were like, oh, yeah, we want to come. Yes, yes, we'll have our people come and blah, blah, blah. So we had the festival named the Black Cultural Festival, and nobody showed up but the African Americans. And so
That's not surprising. But carry on.
yeah, so we went back to the drawing board. We went back and asked, well, you all said you were so excited and then you didn't show up. Why? They said,
What's
well, when
going
you
on?
say Black, we think you mean African Americans. I'm Nigerian, or I'm Cameroon, or I'm, so that's when we
Ah,
um, said, let's make it the African Roots and Heritage Festival. That way, no matter when you came, you identify with the word African, roots and heritage. And so then, of the 35 nations that were represented, 19 of those nations came together to help me plan the African Roots and Heritage Festival, which occurred in 2007. And from
oh,
there on,
gotcha.
we've been growing, and we expanded into the African Roots and Heritage Foundation, which is the umbrella for all of the public programs that we participate in.
Oh, that's interesting. So the other ethnic groups didn't identify with the original theme or name that was
Right.
chosen. And I have this conversation a lot with my spouse and other, you know, Black people of America. And there's this, being born in Africa, I never really I just saw myself as a person. I really didn't think myself as Black or white. I always tell my wife that I didn't even know the difference between an albino, a light-skinned person, and a Black person till I was like maybe 12 or 13. It just didn't register to me. To me, it was just people. And
Mhm.
then you move to America, you have all these different groups, and I was very, first of all, I'm gonna be honest, I was very naive when it came to Black history from the American perspective, so to speak, right? So we Africa obviously were familiar with colonialism, but on seeing or hearing the stories or seeing the perspective of how people from here that were born here see it, like I'm Black. So when my wife says, when people here say they are Black, they don't really mean that they just mean that they are Black as in Black skin. Now, you have that distinction, which is a little bit, it creates a conundrum in my mind. It's like it's very confusing because to me, if you say you're a Black person, that just means that you are somebody that's associated with the continent, but you have to be very specific because both people from here and people from Africa, we just have too many identities, which kind of takes me back to the original point I was making earlier about these different languages. It creates a rich culture, but somewhere it feels as though it also divides us in some ways. Wouldn't you agree? Or am I not understanding or seeing it this right? I get the part where, it's great. This is me, I'm Yoruba. It creates this whole diverse pool of people, but somewhere I also see it as something, as a fractal line that's you can easily leverage it to break people apart, so to speak. Just
Well, how can I say? Um, can you accuse an orange from being an orange, and an ear of corn
from being an
from
old
being an
ear
ear of
corn.
corn?
No, you can't.
You
You can't.
enjoy them both. You like oranges and you like corn.
True. You
They're
do.
different and they have their own DNA code. So it's not
Yeah.
division, it's diversity. It is how could I say? It's not a monolith. There are many different peoples in the world. And so if you believe that there's one creator, you have to know that that one creator loved everybody to be different and not the same. Or else he would have just made one people and they just had one language and they all just look alike.
True. True. That's a fair point. Very fair.
So the diversity is a challenge for us, especially along the lines of language. And but we as humans, we know how to embrace it by learning a few words of another person's language, by being tolerant, uh,
Hmm.
in all sorts of ways that we can still enjoy without um, we can still enjoy one another as they are. And I think that's the greatest lesson. If we want to say that there's one creator and he has a lesson for the whole world and he put us on this earth and he's saying, learn how to get along. That's your life purpose. To learn how to get along with someone that does not look like you, that does not speak like you, that's not that
Does
does
not
not have
think
the
like
same
you.
cultural habits like you. Learn how to get along. And when you learn how to get along, then you can leave this earth. Until then, you got to stay here and
You gotta
suffer.
stay and keep figuring it out. Yeah.
Right.
But that's a very good point. I tend to look at it that way too, that I mean, um, life is a journey, it's an experience where you basically learn how to love, because love is much bigger than our, in my view, our myopic definition of what that is. But true love transcends everything, and it's much harder to truly love one another in the true sense of the word than you would think. Just
Mhm.
That's just my view. And I I have a lot of, it's very aching to look back, because I left Cameroon back in 2016. It was October. I got here October 6th, 2016. I'll never forget. And just no, September 6th, 2016. And then just about a month later, that's when the crisis in the Northwest and Southwest region started. And it started, with lawyers and teachers just going to the streets. And we are in what, 6, 7 years today, maybe 8, I don't know. And I've seen this situation devolve into a kind of chaos that I would have never imagined. People back home now are just used to gunshots. People are used to people killing other folks, and it's really, really impacted me in ways that I don't think Cameroon is not the place I grew up in. I don't think that's the place that still exists today. It's changed a lot in ways that are so not great. And I just question, because when I look at what the actual actors, right, the people on the ground are saying or doing, and then some of the leaders of this movement whom are outside of the country, the things they say and how they approach the situation, there's almost a disdain for the everyday person. Because in my view, the people that are really suffering are the people that are down there at the end of the day. They just want to, get through their day, go to school. Kids are being shunned from going to school, kidnappings, and when you try to analyze the root cause, sure, you can attribute this to colonialism. You can't deny the impact that it's had on the ground, because there's a clear division along the lines of language, the English speaking and the French speaking. But being someone that grew up there, I also know that even within the groups, the say the French side or the English speaking side, I personally know people that have been victimized by this. And it seems to me that at the end of the day, it's almost as if every tribe value the life of the people that speak their own language more than the life of a person that's from another, so to speak, tribe. There's very specific examples that I could name, but I probably don't need to get into it. I just find it, and it's almost as if I wish it wasn't the case, but I've seen a lot of things that tell me that it's very easy for somebody that is not wise to use these little differences, this thing that is supposed to enrich us, to divide us and even destroy us. And I'll even argue that even the colonial masters did the same thing. That's what explains the Maquisard War, where people basically, you're probably familiar with Umnyobe, NS1J, those people that fought in the Cameroonian Revolution.
Yes.
They basically use the same tactics, so divide and conquer. And I feel as though it's very easy for you to pick up, to use these differences and wedge us apart. And I really think that has been the cornerstone of how they've been able to keep us, to weaken us and divide us for so long. Because I don't see anything else that is truly stopping us from coming together. And even within our communities, when I go to play soccer, it's almost as if the guys that are from Nigeria, it's like, I like to see all of us as brothers, but there's so many little, and I guess every community has this kind of internal politics, so to speak, right? Every community might have.
Rivalry.
Yeah, but I see it in ways that are really, that make me question as to whether, is this just a blessing or could it be a curse? Or is it just that some people have decided to use it to divide us? I don't know. I'm just wondering, but I've definitely seen some things that make me wonder if this whole variation in languages and culture hasn't in some ways set us back. Not because of the fact that they are there, because they were there and somebody could leverage those to split us apart, right? Yeah, that was a long rant, but sometimes I think that there's a need for us to educate each other, not just about the beauty and the richness of our culture, but also to call out the fact that this same thing could be used, just like, a knife. You could use a knife to peel an orange, but you could also use a knife to stab somebody. So depending on how you use it, you could also do damage. And I don't think that there's enough conversations or enough call outs to that aspect, because it's true why it's beautiful, but to me, it's one of those things that has really been weaponized against us. That's just how I see it. Not that they are bad, but I think they've been used for nefarious reasons in many respects.
I agree. I agree with you. But this is the Obama said that we are the change that we seek. And each individual actually has the responsibility to plant seeds, to nurture those seeds, to bring about the community change that they like. And the first place you start is with yourself, and then with your own family. And, just plant those seeds of togetherness. What would it take for us to show togetherness? What will it take for us to show unity across family lines, across ethnic lines, across language lines, across the borders of countries? These are things that individuals, organizations, communities have to strive for and practice. And knowing that everybody is not going to get the lesson, everybody's not going to hear the lesson, but there will be those that will hear the lesson. So the thing is for us to put forth our effort to make it happen. One of the things that I'm doing with ARHF and the AU is that I hold an essay contest each year, asking the participants to tell me the value of speaking and preserving their native language. Now,
Wow,
I'm compiling these essays to put in an anthology. And the way these anthologies will be ordered is that the essays I collect are in French and English. Whatever the ethnic group is of that person, the essay is going to first appear in the African native language. And so many people say, well, why? Why put it in the African language? Because nobody knows how to read it. And my answer is, I'm putting it in your face to let you know it does exist. And simultaneously, we have developed the New African Thought Youth Training Institute, that the core courses will be in the Cameroon language. So we're putting it in your face. We know you can't read it, but we also have the facilities to begin to teach the next generation those languages. So when this book is 10, 20 years old, these individuals will be able to sit down and read it in the native languages. You have to have a vision and you have to have a plan. So why should I wait until they learn the Cameroon language, which at that point, you know, at my age, I may not be here. So I do what I can now and leave it as a legacy. So everything that I do and publish will be first in the African language, then in French, if that's the way it was submitted, and then translated to English, because that's the only language that I know. So I have to do that, as if nobody can read it, so what? I'm going to publish it, because I believe that the work that I'm doing today will manifest itself tomorrow, that we will have readers that will be able to pick up the book and read it in the African languages. So I know that I'm blazing a path that no other have gone down. So, and I know that other people will begin to copy it. I know others will copy that style because they will see.
Wow. Yeah, that's very, very thoughtful of you. So this essay contest, how exactly does it work? I think that's a great idea. I like it. It's I've never heard about it, obviously. So can you shed more light? Let's say, I don't know, is there something you do with schools, or is it something where just anybody can just apply and submit an essay? How exactly do you run this?
Well, the essay is done in two parts. First, it is part of my signature program, which is the Anita M. Diop Scholarship of Excellence. Okay. And we award cash prizes, computers, laptops, Wi-Fi routers, all things computers. It started in 2007 with the Black Cultural Festival, where I asked the community. I limited it to the city of Columbus because for many reasons. One, when we go into a community, I want the community to know the winners. Which gives us the credibility.
Right.
And so from there, we have gone into Tanzania, Ghana, and now Cameroon. Cameroon has been the focus for the last 4 years. So I have gone into the communities of Ezeka and Baxo, which is the Bassa community.
I was actually going to ask you about that. I saw some videos on YouTube of you being down there. I saw some speeches. You was getting out of the vehicle, but carry on. I just to say I've seen some footage of that. Yes.
Okay. And so we established our Global Day of Community Service. That's the day that we go into a particular community. Well, we would have arranged prior to and asked the community to write the essays on a particular topic. And we have a panel of judges that are blind. When I say blind, they're not part of the association. They're colleagues from other states, other countries. Okay, so they judge the essays, and we select the winners, and we give the donations to the school. From Izeka, we struck up a partnership with the University of Yaoundé 1 with the Department of African Civilizations and Literature. And we've committed 2 years service to the Global Day of Community Services to those students. The first year we gave out cash prizes, and then last year we gave out computers to the body of students that wrote the essays. Now, I got the essay contest from the Harlem Renaissance. Remember, I told you I'm a African American history teacher, and one of the segments that I teach on is the Harlem Renaissance. And when in our history we were into the Harlem Renaissance, individuals like Sterling Brown, Alan Locke, W.E.B. Du Bois, Catherine Dunham, and so many more, they posed a contest to try to raise the consciousness and get the community into thinking. And the question is, what is the new Negro? We've been slaves, and now we're free. And as free men and women, how do we envision ourselves? So that was the contest that was put out. And they created an anthology called the Negro Caravan, which is a series of essays of the thinkers of that time to describe how we shall progress as a people. How do we fashion ourselves? Do we get educated? What type of work do we do? They really went into explore how to reshape and reform ourselves as a people. So I utilize that same strategy and asking these communities, capturing their thoughts, provoking them to think beyond what they can see right here and right now, and to see into the future, to see the power of imagination, and to see themselves transform. Even after the first essay contest, the students were shy. They really didn't know if they could win or if they had the ability to write. And after the contest was over and the rewards were given out, so many people said, I want to be a part of this. And so the next year, everybody
showed up,
participated, and wrote. And they said how it opened up something in them to write on the topic.
So how do you
them a
pick the
better
topic?
writer.
How do you pick the topic? What do you have the same question every year, or do you change the question?
I changed the question, but it's still around heritage and language. Because I'm a cultural expert, all things culture. This year we're going into the kingdom of Oka, the kingdom that have promised, that has given us land. And this essay contest will be structured slightly different, because before I was just dealing with the secondary schools and the colleges. But now, since we're dealing with the kingdom of Oka, the essay is open to everyone in the kingdom. In exchange for the body of essays, we're going to be giving out sewing machines. And the reason why we're giving out sewing machines, because it was the Nkunkuma of Oka who is, one, preserving the Obon, and two, designing the official traditional uniform or regalia for traditional kings, rulers, and so forth. And it was her, as I understand, that said, when she came to reign, we no longer have to wear this colonizer's uniform, because there was a uniform set aside specifically for traditional rulers. And she said, no, we can go back to what our ancestors used to wear.
That's powerful.
Since we're no longer under colonization. So she designs them. And not only does she design them, she preserves the obum tree, and she teaches the young women how to create and work with the obum material. So we thought, instead of giving out computers, we would give out sewing machines to the kingdom to assist them into
In that
training
mission.
their youth in cultural garments.
Oh, wow. That is very, very powerful. That is a beautiful story. Wow.
Thank you.
Wow. And sometimes when I'm talking to people, I sound crazy, but I'm like, there are so many aspects of our culture today that we actually think is our culture, but it might not be. A very good example, I don't know if you're familiar with the kaba, the one of the most popular, traditional attires.
Yes, I'm
But
familiar.
I don't know how I came to this, but it looks as though the actual original design of the kaba it's not really a cultural thing. I think it was something the colonizer did. So our women would wear that, and that would hide their shapes and their forms. They didn't want our women to look beautiful and attractive. And today we think of kaba as a cultural thing, but that's not really what we used to wear. It was something that was designed and basically engineered into our culture. For whatever reason, the colonizer thought that that was a great idea. And up until like a few years ago, in my mind, kaba was a cultural wear, but I came to realize that no, it really is not. And I can only imagine how many more things there are like that in our culture today.
Yes. What it was is the culture, I mean, the colonizers did indeed wanted to hide the African woman's figure. And that's what the kaba does. But the Cameroonians have owned it.
Yes.
In other
In a
words,
way.
they have taken it.
Yeah,
That was a condition,
definitely.
and it became a popular item. Even they had the kaba, and then they have the sawa kaba, and they might have
Yes.
other kabas.
Yes.
And you can tell whose kaba it is by the way it's designed.
By the
So
fabric, yeah.
so that's something that's very resilient about the African genius, is that whatever its circumstances
They
currently
can make
are,
they can make
they
it
will
beautiful
make
make
it
it
work.
relevant.
They will make it work.
That is
And
so true.
I own several kabas.
There's a saying that impossible ne pas Camerounais, like we come today they call us the continent. And I say this as a Cameroonian, but I genuinely believe that Cameroon, basically Central Africa, Congo Basin area, is truly like the not just, and if you really think about it, that's the area that kind of holds, where I think they found the Eve gene. If it wasn't in the Congo area, it might have been in Ethiopia, I'm not sure. But anyways, I genuinely view Cameroon as like this one place where it's really a melting pot. It's truly beautiful. Like people are so different, the cultures are so different, the languages are so different. It's awesome. It has all these different places. I barely visited Cameroon before I left, but I started visiting Cameroon when I was right about to leave the country. And my gosh, it's amazing. I don't know how much travel you've done within the country, but there's beautiful places. I went to Limbe for the first time. I was probably in my late teens. I went to the northern region like once. It's such a beautiful place that most people in Cameroon, believe it or not, probably have barely visited Cameroon. I'm one of those folks, and it's a beautiful place if you
It is very
just think
beautiful.
about it. That's why they call us the continent today. Like literally, it's a thing on social media. Everybody calls Cameroon le continent. Like we're a representation of the whole continent in one
Yeah,
little
Africa in
spot.
miniature.
In miniature, yeah, exactly. So that's crazy. One thing that so I was while I was doing my research, I came across a video that was posted about 10 years ago. It's where you were talking about the people of Ethiopia are returning to Christ. I don't know if that rings a bell. Does that ring a bell? No?
Yes.
Okay.
The return
So
to the ancestors.
yes, yes. So there's something you said, and I'm just learning about this now, this specific date. So June 14th, 1452, Alfonso V. Now I have a couple of questions. So I have questions going back from that date and questions going forward from that date, right? So first of all, what is it about Alfonso V that is so important for us Africans to be aware of? If you can
Okay.
spend a little bit of
So,
time on that.
Alfonso V, he was the Pope. He was the one that legalized slavery. They said that the Portuguese had every right to go into Africa and enslave all Negroes perpetually. So
Okay.
it came from the Catholic Church, an edict that if you know about laws and anything at that particular time in the white world, the Catholic Church was law and order. So
Okay.
posing themselves as God, they said, okay, we white people, we give them the permission to go into Africa to enslave them, to enrich us.
That's very interesting.
Mhm.
So I was familiar with the what is it called?
The Dame de
This
Versus.
no. So no, I mean prior to me running across this video of yours, the partition of Africa was done. It was in 1875?
1845, the Berlin
1845.
Conference.
Yeah, the Berlin Conference, right, where they partitioned Africa. And this is common knowledge in the African psyche today. That is why we have all these African countries, right? So, but I was also aware prior to finding out about this that that the slavery had existed long before this Berlin Conference. And when I say slavery, I'm really talking about the Arabic side of slavery, not just
East
the Western
African
side.
slave trade.
East African slave trade, yeah. So try to put that in context and help me understand the timeline between the East African slave trade and the transatlantic Atlantic slave trade, and when exactly does Alfonso V comes up with this declaration or law, and how does that play into the whole slavery
Okay.
slave trade of Africa?
Okay. Well, the East African slave trade goes back into the 7th century.
Okay.
And so that's where they had taken many Africans out through Tanzania, Kenya, the eastern side of the Indian Ocean. And
Okay.
Pope Alfonso V, he decreed in 1452, 1452 or 92. I'm sorry.
I think it's 52 if
Yes.
my record is right. Yeah,
Right.
but go ahead.
Then 1492 is the King James Version of the Bible.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's right.
So what happened was that gave the Portuguese merchants the right to go into Africa and enslave the Africans. Okay.
Okay.
Um,
And is that
slavery.
after? Would that be after? That is so if the East African slave trade was back in the 17th century, so this is happening after
Yes,
West.
after.
Okay.
Some
So slavery
700
was
years
already
after.
there. So we
Yeah.
already had slavery, East African slave trade. Got it. Okay.
So that's where the Portuguese went into the Congo Basin in Angola, Cameroon, the Congo, to bring forth the first slaves into the Western Hemisphere. Okay. But when I went to Tanzania and went to Bagamoyo, I learned that the East African slave traders would sell to the West African slave traders because they had not established their trade routes as of yet. And when you go to Tanzania, you get that DNA recognition again. Okay. I've been to 32 different countries, and there's some countries where you will see somebody that you know, either in your family or your neighbor, you're going to see that DNA recognition. Some countries, there is no DNA recognition, none that you can recognize. Okay. And so the misnomer is that we all came from West Africa, and we came from Central Africa, East Africa, some parts of South Africa, not all parts, but some parts, and West Africa. We came from all over Africa, primarily Central and West, into the Western Hemisphere. But because the East African slave trade was already in existence, now you know people like to go the route of the least resistance, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So they bought slaves from the East. And that's how they found themselves into the Americas. Okay, that's how they found themselves into the Americas.
So is it safe to say that this declaration of Alfonso the Fifth, basically he was trying to, let me say, formalize the slave trade between the slave trade for the West? He basically formalized it and made it to where they basically could go to Africa, get slaves themselves. They wouldn't have to go through the East slave traders.
Exactly.
Don, and what was the name of that document again? Don Diversif.
The Dom Diversis.
Don Diversis.
Or some people call it the Age of Discovery.
Wow, that is very interesting. I didn't know that. Well, first of all, I didn't know that he made this type of declaration. And I'm not sure how to put this in question, but what gave him that type of authority to declare that Africa was an open market? Who told him he could do that?
He was the Pope. And there's 4 things you have to know about Europe. You have to know these things, and if you don't know these things, you will always understand it or misunderstand it. You won't understand it. Okay. So first thing, Europe during that period of time was suffering from starvation. Their land could not produce food as they needed to survive their people. The second thing, the Caucasian people, period, just simply has a lower fertility rate than any other race of people. The third thing is that they were warmongers. They would always be in war and killing off the people faster than they could reproduce themselves. And the fourth thing is sickness and disease. They were being wiped out by the Black Plague and the Yellow Plague and this plague and that plague. Okay, so these 4 things made them look at their racial mortality and said, if we do not make a change, we will cease to exist as a race of people. So they had to find a way to feed themselves. This was a hunger move, because you know, when you're hungry, your stomach would make your feet get up and go to the kitchen, right?
Right.
So they were hungry. So their feet had to get up and go to other lands. They said it has to be
the
something
kitchen,
else
Africa,
out here in this earth in order for us to survive. And once they look at these 4 things, and once they arrived in Africa, and you know yourself, they changed those 4 things and put it on the African. And they said that those 4 things are not them. And I'll show you how. When they got to Africa, and you know Cameroon, food grows wild. It's going to rain, and that food is going to grow. So the first thing they saw is, oh, these people are eating good, okay? The second thing they saw was the fertility rate. Oh, they're multiplying. The third thing, the original African, when they came upon the African, they did not participate in bloodshed as a means of conflict resolution. Okay.
Well, who didn't participate in bloodshed? The white folks?
The Africans.
Oh,
The
okay.
original Africans. You go back in history, they resolved it with a war dance or some type of competition, but not that of shedding blood. And if you know about Shaka Zulu,
Yes.
there's been many kings. You in Cameroon, there's many kings. Can't nobody name not one Cameroon king, but they can name Shaka Zulu. They can name King Moshoshaway. And why can they name them? I'll save that for a second. I'm gonna get to this thing. So Africans, they had food, they multiplied, they were healthy, not given to sickness and disease. And what was the fourth one? They weren't more warmongers.
Warmongers, okay? Yeah.
Okay, so now if you think about media today, what does the Europeans say about the African? Oh, there's war. They're fighting wars.
We're at war. We are starving.
They're starving.
We have a lot of diseases that we need help to cure with. But it's funny, I still think that with arguable are still having more kids than everybody else, though.
Yes.
Even though they might like to sell that as a different storyline, but we do have Africans have more kids than everybody else for sure.
Yes. Except for the Asians. Asians still leading the population. So they tried to turn this story around and say that, oh, you don't have any skills, you don't have this. And it was all to break down the psychology to tell you that you're barbaric and that you didn't have a God. And they had God.
Uncivilized.
They were saving you.
Civilized, that's right.
Yeah, and they were saving you. Saving you from what? We have food.
Exactly.
We're multiplying. They needed saving. So the whole hold on. It seems my mother is burning up something. Hold on just one moment, please.
Okay. We will be right back.
You burning something. Off of food detail. Oops.
Okay.
Okay, I'm back. I'm sorry.
No worries.
So
yeah, so, we were talking about the Africans and how they turned those things and made claims that it was us that was sick and starving and stuff.
So the thing that you have to understand is that the condition of Europe, they were the poor ones. They were the poor races of the world. And it was slavery. When they began to engage in slavery, that is when, for the first time, the Europeans were able to see wealth. And it is because of my ancestors that they enjoy the wealth and the systems they have built to this day. So they're going to continue to hold the power as long as they can bewitch the mind, as long as they can keep you thinking that you're backwards, that they have to save you, that they have to do something for you. As long as you're away from your original mind and spirituality that your ancestors practice, you're always at their beck and call. You're not in power. Every time you go to their church and worship their God, you're giving them power and making yourself powerless. And that's what the African Renaissance is about. The ancestors are calling us home to come back to ourselves, to come back to our roots, to empower ourselves and receive the blessing that is for us to have. For instance, all of the minerals under the ground in Africa belong, quote unquote, to the foreigners. They're wealthy because of our earth.
Our resources.
What I want to bring this really home to you. It said that we are made from the dust of the ground, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've heard that.
Yeah.
If you believe that or not, but we do know as a practice, we put our bodies back into the ground, right?
Right, right.
So we become that dust. We were that dust and we become that dust.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when they go in and find gold, whose dust is it? It's the dust of your grandmother. It's the dust of your grandfather. Because we are the earth and the earth is us. So when they own the mineral rights, they own your ancestors. And in the case of, was that Burkina Faso?
Mm-hmm.
I may have it wrong.
No, it's three of them: Burkina Faso, Niger, and three of them that got. You mean you're talking about the countries that recently got independence via coup, right?
Yes, but one specifically just terminated all of the mineral rights.
That would be Burkina Faso. You got it right. Yep.
Okay. So, yes, Africa is moving in the right direction. Yes, terminate the contract, because every time you dig and get gold, diamonds, bauxite, you're digging up my ancestors.
You don't have any African country or company that owns rights to minerals up here in North America or Canada. So one of the most basic economic principles is parity, which is part of the conversation going on with this whole TikTok situation. So if I can't let you do to me what you won't let me do to your market. So if you do this in my market, I should be able to do it in your market, right? So to be fair, I think to me it's a completely logical and economic decision. Like, there should be parity. So if you are allowed to do X, Y, Z in my market, it should be fair. I should be allowed to do X, Y, Z in yours, and give as is basically where the market is not fair, which is why I think it makes sense to terminate those contracts. In Cameroon, France is actually the biggest exporter of wood for a country that doesn't really have much of a forest. Tiny country at that. And it's funny how we see a lot of logging activity going on in Sangmalima, going on in what's that place where my dad used to work? It's Mbengui. You go to the east, you see they are pulling a lot of resources out of Africa, quite literally, and then they are turning around and making all this money, all this added value that they're able to create. But one thing that has always been eating me up, right? We know what the white folks did, right? They came, they colonized us, they used, Christianity maybe as a Trojan horse. The Arabs used Islam as a Trojan horse. They came into our community, they polluted. I actually did a video on this sometime last year. I don't know if you've seen it, but I do think that is one of the biggest issues we have. However, the question that I really have is, what responsibility does our own African leaders back then and today have with respect to what's going on? Because if I'm the head of my household, right, I own it, I run it. And if somebody comes to this house and kills me, kidnaps me or my wife or my son, that person is doing wrong, but I, as the defender of this line, of this entity, of this place, I'm supposed to be able to stand my ground and fight back. What responsibility do you think that African leaders back then have, or accountability that they need to take? And what responsibilities do you think they have today, which should be very separate from the responsibility of what the African people as a people have? I tend not to, not that I don't blame the people, but I think that the decision makers do have a very, very important role to play in this whole socioeconomic game. And I wanted to get your perspective on what you think the responsibility of our leaders, when I say leaders, not just the presidents of the country today, but back then the chiefs and the kings and the leadership of all these tribes. Because the stories, a good example will be what the Yorubas and the Igbos did. So they basically sold each other back during slavery time to the, to the colonizer. So, which takes me back to the point where I said that they use this difference in our culture to pit us against each other. There are actually recorded instances where the king of one tribe is going to subdue another tribe and sell off that tribe for slavery and then take over the land of that tribe. That happens in at least certain, I don't know how common that was, but there's a record of things like that happening. So what's your take on the fact that our leaders may have played a key role in actually enabling slavery?
Yeah, the leaders have played a role back then, yesterday, and today. But we see a new leader rising. And one of the common threads to success is, how they say, Sophia Kwa, moving, removing the spell. A spell was cast over Africa through what you know as Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
They have to renew their mind, because Christianity says when your enemy slaps you, just turn the other cheek and take it.
Right.
And the new leaders are saying, we're not going to turn the other cheek. That's foolishness. We do not accept that doctrine as the way we should govern our lives. That doctrine keeps us docile. That doctrine keeps us, limits our ability to think, because you ask us to believe, but when we think about it, it's not sound.
Yeah,
so
it's not making sense.
The new leaders are saying they're shaking off all forms of witchcraft, and understand witchcraft is not that traditional African spirituality that they named so you would not use the original power that's in you. Witchcraft is the lies that they tell. It is the religious institutions that they spread all over Africa. That is witchcraft. When you get free from that and come back to your origin, let me tell you this. When I was in Cameroon, I came across certain people, and certain people said that of their ethnic lineage, they are gods. And another said that they are lords. So what does that mean? That means that they're gods manifested in the flesh. So their system of spirituality give them that superhuman, or what the world calls magical properties, that those coming from Europe
didn't understand.
Their God didn't give them that. They don't have it. So yeah, it's magical to them. So wow, they have a superpower that we don't have. We have to tell them that their power is evil, that their ways are dark, that their ways are backwards. Because that's the only way we can get an edge over them, is that if we trick their mind and we substitute and give them a fake God to believe in, then we can perpetually have them in this stronghold. We teach it to the first generation,
and they'll teach it to the next.
Okay. And the way they took Africa was through the missionaries. They would go in and kidnap the children.
Couldn't agree more. That is so true.
And say, well, and take over their farms and say, well, you know, if you come and work on this farm, we'll give you a watermelon and we'll train your children in the school because we're superior.
Right.
And they would kill and rape the men and women and children. So you're in a desperate situation. They just killed my family. So now I'm desperate.
I'm trying to survive.
I have to survive.
And do you think that is how we eventually, because I say this sometimes, and when I say this amongst my friends, I don't know if you know this, but Africa is very, very religious, you know. Actually, I come from a Catholic family. My wife was raised in a Baptist family, and there's no African person that I know that is not either a Muslim or a Christian. Everybody I know has some type of religious affiliations, which it took me a long time to realize that there's a very huge difference between spirituality and religion. I've got into that rabbit hole a few years ago, and I discovered a lot of things. But to me, this is the core, I think this is the core philosophical problem with the African psyche. I do think that Africans are, I don't want to say lost, but they have been hoodwinked somewhat.
They are bewitched. They are under a spell.
Yeah, like basically, like it's almost as though they're under a spell. That's right, because it's crazy that today, by the time I was living in Cameroon, there was in Kumba, there was a church at every other corner. You know, there's everybody is a community pastor, people starting churches, people pray from Monday to Sunday. And nobody is really trying to, and I'm looking at the problem at scale, right? You can look at a use case and say, well, this person, there's nothing wrong with believing in God or praying, obviously. But when you think about the problem at scale, I see it as a huge distraction from what our people should be focusing on, right?
Exactly.
People are focusing. I basically think Africa is focusing on the wrong thing. I see kids go to church Monday through Sunday. I mean, when do you have time to actually, you know, study or make something or produce something that's useful or start a farm or transform your crops into candy or into a drink and try to do something that adds value to your community? But I think the problem is that since we are such a spiritual people and religion is basically all we know to be spirituality, that's probably why we gravitate so much towards religion. But the problem is that most people that are religious actually think they are spiritual. They don't understand that they are just being religious. They're not actually being spiritual. I think that's kind of where the confusion or the conundrum comes in.
We don't gravitate towards religion. We went there because of fear.
Okay.
And when the first man and woman is there in survival mode, when they bring forth their next generation, they're going to teach them that.
Yeah, this is how you survive.
Well, it's no longer survival, then it appears to be a choice. But that's
true.
what,
okay, yeah.
That's what your parents knew. That's what your parents taught you.
Right. That's true.
So it appears as a choice. And then it builds into it that if you don't do it, you're going to die and go to hell. It's all based on fear of another world that nobody has been to and came back to tell.
Tell us. That is so.
So it's built on fear. You got to go to church every Sunday, whether you believe or not. You're so programmed to go, you go. You just go. You listen. He might sound good. You might fall asleep. So you go out of habit, and you go out of fear. If you stop going, you know, oh, the devil gonna get me. Oh, I'm gonna fall into sin, but you're sinning already. You know, it creates this whole paranoia if you do not go and participate, because they put in your head, forsake not the assembling of yourselves together.
it is so interesting. Now that here's the fact that I had to wrestle because I was very coming to the States, I was very religious, but I had to wrestle because like I said, I really for a few years of my life, I went into this deep, thoughtful research. I was really trying to figure out like who I am, what my purpose was. And then it just kind of hit me, that in my tribe, we have a name for God. We call him C.
See?
Everybody, see, that is a name of God in my dialect.
Mm-hmm.
But what's interesting is that there is no name for Jesus. There's no, because even if I'm talking to my grandmother and you want to say Jesus, you literally have to say Jesus Christ or Jesus Christ or something like that. But if you want to say God, you don't need to use the English term. There's a very specific term. Once you say it, we know exactly what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
That rose a red flag. And I was like, And then I also came to the realization that, wait a minute, if we weren't colonized, then maybe we wouldn't even know what the Bible is or what, Christianity is and so on and so forth. And I
Let me
was,
give
go
you
ahead.
one thought. You said if we were not colonized, maybe we wouldn't know. Exactly. What do you know about your culture and say your neighbors, the next one over? Your God is called C, and say maybe their God is called Mungu.
Mm-hmm.
If you look closely, no culture in Cameroon tries to proselytize the next man culture.
No, never. That's right.
It is only in religion that proselytization takes place. And that is because they have to recruit the next member. They have to recruit. But in culture, in your ethnic group, you were born into it. And nobody's culture or spirituality or spiritual system is greater than the one that your DNA is coded for. Okay? So be it Basa or be it T-Car, if those two people came together, it's not a war. Oh, my God is greater than your God or your God. No, you both respect your original being and making. It is only the foreigners that have to come in and recruit you through destroying your mind and separating you from your origin. Because in the beginning, you had culture. You didn't have religion. You only have religion when you go to the foreigner's church. But they have tried to intertwine religion as culture. Religion is not culture. Culture comes from God. In your case, it comes from C. Mm-hmm. Religion comes from man. He's called King James. Okay? I mean, seriously.
This is probably gonna get me in my community. I don't know if you understand how religious my people are.
I know.
Oh, you do know. Okay.
I know.
Yeah, it's such, and you can barely have conversations. So if you have any, if you're just asking certain type of questions, right, make people so uncomfortable that they could basically just walk away.
They want to fight you.
Yeah, and I used to be that guy, so I get it. I get where I come from, but now I'm like, oh my God, they just don't realize. They have no idea.
So I'm gonna tell you what's happening. C is waking up in you. C is telling you to go back to your roots and hear your DNA creator. That's what's happening. That's why you're having these thoughts. That's what has happened. That's what happened to me. And I still can't say who my creator is. I mean, I know Basa, but I haven't studied that part yet. But there comes a place and time that what's inside of you is greater than what they're trying to put in you. That's why they say, this is how can I say? Well, the Bible condemns itself when it says, behold, I stand at the door and knock. He has to get in. But C was born in you. C is you. You are C and C is you. So you have to let Jesus in because he is not of the origin. He is foreign. And what happens to your antibodies when a foreign substance come into your body, like cancer? It takes it over and kills you.
Yep.
Your body tries to fight it. So C is trying to fight that invasion, that intrusion. C is trying to fight it. And you're waking up. And it's a process. It's a process.
It is.
Because I used to be that Bible thumping, oh, you're going to hell if you don't believe just the way I believe. I was her. I was her.
Oh, wow.
And it took me, I'll say, it took me 20 years to accept it. Because I was talking about this last night. My church fell apart. It was just so much sin. It just fell apart.
Oh, wow.
And so I was in a place of looking for a new church home because what? Forsake not the assembling of yourselves together. Those devils fell apart, but they're still God, right? So I was looking for a different church, and my aunt asked me to come and go to this particular church. And my C said, they're not going to pray for you. I'm like, oh, that's just the devil trying to keep me from going to church. And the Bible say, oh, forsake not the assembly of yourselves. I'm going to church. I went to church. They had an altar call. And I was the last person. And the preacher said, I can't pray for you. And I was hurt.
Ooh.
And he said, what's in you is greater than what's in me. He says, sister, I need you to pray for me. And I went away and I didn't understand. But my C was telling me that my creator was greater than the witchcraft I had been bewitched with and my family had been bewitched with since the onslaught of slavery. And so over the years, I got braver and began to stand in it. And more revelations will come forth, and more spirituality will come forth, and more spirituality will come forth. And to the point that I'm going to give you the link to the speech that I gave in Cameroon. When I gave that speech, you could feel the atmosphere break open.
Wow.
That was the first chip off of the spell that had been cast on our people.
Wow.
And I'll direct you to that link. It's on my website. But
yeah, I think yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
When you are become free, you can stand on it. And the first thing is, if I don't go to church, will I die and go to hell? My C said, nobody that professed Christianity has ever died and came back and told you what's on the other side. Why fear the other side when you have to live right now? And that removed that element of fear. And then I went through the phase of, well, if I want to go to church, I just listen to the choir because I love the choir. But I got to the place that understand that that was a contaminated place and that I didn't need to be there. Now I'll still go. I went to church when I was in Cameroon. A friend begged me because I kept saying no. But I actually went, and I'm free. I go and not be afraid that I'm gonna be contaminated again because my seed has grown strong in me.
So one thing that kind of part of the reason I said that we are drawn to religion because of spiritual beings is, in my case, for instance, right? You grew up, what in your mind was spirituality, now you find out is religion. You're like, well, that's the only form of that's the closest thing to spirituality that I know I can relate to. So the question becomes, where do you go from here? And then you begin to wonder if, because I go to church ever so often, I pray with my wife. When we're about to eat, we always pray and give thanks, and we try to be spiritual, but it's almost as though, so it's like a mixed bag. It's almost as though you intuitively understand it, but you don't have any sort of the closest thing to, yeah, the closest thing to what I'm trying to describe would be like, because religion has a lot of rituals, most of what they do are and ritual doesn't mean something negative, like things that they just do as a group, right? So I don't have any type of spiritual practices, so to speak. All I knew growing up was just having faith and praying. And I still think I have that. I just channel it in a different way, so to speak, right? So because I intuitively understand that I have a creator, there's no way that myself or everybody else could exist on this planet if somebody didn't engineer it to be the way it is. So there is a higher power for sure. That's not an argument. It's just that for me, it's that transition is a little bit bumpy, or has been bumpy for me, because it's almost as though you're dropping this practice and this process, but then you don't know what else to fill it up with. And I think that's where the risk is, right? Because there's a saying that if you have a hole in your heart the size of God, something else is going to fill it. So if people now get turned off by religion, they come to this realization, like, oh my goodness, this is like a cult, this is a sect, this is witchcraft. Okay, that may very well be true, but if you don't have that, you're going to have to replace that with something. Now, what that something is could be better or could be worse. And I think that the chances of it being worse are actually very, very high, because where does somebody turn to whenever you wake up and realize that, okay, religion is bogus or it's not exactly what you thought it was? How do you handle yourself post that realization? What do you do in lieu of religion, so to speak?
What I did was this, because I just did not know, but I knew that I was on a spiritual path. And when I pray to he and she who created me. Okay? He and she that created me. And from there, I would get spiritual messages, dreams, revelations, everything to take me on my path. And that was the same question that I had. And even still right now, the level of how could I say, the spirit proved itself to me with positioning me in the world, taking me places that I could never think of, I could never imagine. And even when I go to give my speech, I can't even write my speech. My speeches come as an oracle at the time that I'm giving it.
Wow.
And but it took me to be brave to just let it flow, because it's like, oh, I know these people are super religious and so forth and so on, but they have to be told. That's the only way that they're going to come back to themselves. And so, because I had a Bible background, there is some wisdom in some of the phrases. And it says, be wise as a serpent, yet harmless as a dove. So there's a way to ease people into the conversation or ease people into your message and not just throw it at them all at one time. Because, if I, tell the average Christian that they are actually practicing witchcraft, they're going to put their walls up. They're not going to believe me. But
And
if
then
I
we
take
wouldn't even
them
want to
down the
engage with
road,
you at that point. Yeah. That would be like a big turnoff for them. I get it. Yeah.
yes. And everything that they've been taught with, it's just like an alarm system. Alert. Now.
Yeah.
So
They almost
there's a
have an
way.
anaphylactic reaction to anything that challenges that construct in their life.
Yes. So there's a way to ease into the conversation. There's a way. It's just like you feed a baby just a little bit. See, I've given you a whole lot, and because I my spirit feels free to do that. Okay, but
That's all.
if I perceive that you couldn't handle it, I would treat you totally different. Okay. And because actually you're ready to hear what I'm saying. They say when the student is ready, the teacher will come.
True. I've heard that line. That's
Mhm.
absolutely true.
Yeah. And so so my position is I work with many ministers, and I make my position known. And some of them can handle it and some of them can't. Even when we were at the conference, there's a man, he was a priest in the Catholic Church. And when I finished my speech, everybody rushed to speak with me. And this man said, I've been a Catholic priest for all these years, and what you're saying is totally right. I agree with you 100%. So the people are ready to hear it. And that's what I had to understand. People are ready to hear my message. And what was so significant when I told you, when I first spoke in Cameroon in 2013, like I said, you could hear the atmosphere break open.
Wow.
And from that point on, everybody that spoke after me made reference to me.
To
And
what you said.
I realized in that I had broken,
You had
I had
opened the
broken
door.
through.
Yeah.
Yes.
You had opened the door.
And by me being from outside, I had the power to say what the local people had been thinking, but could not say because of their position, because of their family, because of because they were on the inside. So I was able to break it open and start the conversation. And these people are well thought out. They've been thinking about this for years, probably decades. But because
I certainly have. For a while. I have. And it's one of those things that we should be having more of these conversations amongst in our community, but our community is very dogmatic as is. It might not seem like this to most people, but you would be an expert and you know that there's a lot of dogma and certain type of constructs in, honestly, like societal construct in Cameroon. I actually wrote so last year I published my first book last year, and one of the things that I was covering in the book was truth, right? So one of the chapters in my book was truth, and I came to this realization that I summarized the Cameroonian, what I consider, right, I want to say the African problem, so to speak. And I of course, every little group in Africa has their own issues and stuff, but at the very, very high level, when I summed it all up, I realized that there were three key things that were missing, or at least are not being implemented consistently across Africa. And I'm saying, when I say Africa, I'm really talking the USA, like Africa as a country comparable to what America is today. So, and I wanted to get your take on this specific thought. So I think that most of our, and this is really speaking to African leadership, political leaders, business leaders, social leaders, teachers, and professors in university, and so on and so forth. I genuinely think that the idea of meritocracy, right, is not being implemented in Africa at scale. And I think arguably it's at least one of the practical problems that we had. So if you have a society where merit is not being recognized, right? So if you're the smartest guy, if you make the best grades, then you should have the opportunity to, go further be it your studies, or if it's a scholarship, you should get that scholarship, and so on and so forth. This specific concept of merit, Cameroon as a use case, it's out the window. In Cameroon, merit is not being recognized. The second thing that I see as a problem is honesty. When I say honesty, I will still use Cameroon because I'm from there. The example of Cameroon will be that our leadership, for instance, are highly corrupt, and I'm not saying that this is unique to Cameroon by any means. There's corruption all over the world, obviously. But in the case of Cameroon, I think that it's uniquely positioned as one of the most corrupt countries in that there's no accountability. There are cases of ministers that embezzled billions of dollars in a country that's supposed to be poor, and they are sitting on the cash, and the country is going the way it's going. The third thing that I think that Africa is missing is pragmatism. And this is where I do think that what you said made a lot of sense, because if mentally in your mind, you don't have clarity, you don't really understand who you are, your purpose, or at least who you were or where you come from, you're a little bit lost, and therefore you really don't know what to do or where to start. Therefore, the solutions that, at least I see, the solutions that are being put forth by our current African leaders are not pragmatic enough. The example I usually use to illustrate this is, you look at a country like Singapore, right? Or China, for instance. If you see the way China was able to be transformed in such a short period of time, call it 4 or 5 decades, 50 years. And Cameroon has been independent for over 50, this is 54, 55 years today. But if you look at where Cameroon is today and look at where Cameroon and Singapore was worse off than Cameroon 40 years ago. But today it's better than even some cities or some states in the United States, right? So Cameroon, I think Africa is missing merit. Africa is missing honesty. Africa is missing pragmatism. As a thought leader, in the field of culture, and you've done a lot of research in this area, what are some of the solutions that you think pragmatically, what are some of the things that we as Africans need to do, be it diaspora, people on the continent, or our leadership, political leaders, business leaders, societal leaders? What are some of the things that we could do to turn Africa into something, basically to turn around the story of Africa from talking about, we get caught up in politics, we get caught up in language, we get caught up in all these things that seem to be an issue all the time. How do we transcend all of that and actually move the continent forward? What are some of the things that we could do today?
One of the everything that you mentioned is part of the process. The first thing is the renewing of the mind. And like I said, we started the New African Thought Youth Training Institute. For me, I'm looking at the youth to train them up to, one, be better negotiators. One, to have a vision and understand the power that they have to implement the vision. You mentioned Singapore, the other Asian countries. The first thing they did when they were released from colonialism, they banned Christianity. They banned it, okay? and they banned the language. The first thing they did was go back to themselves and go back to their origins, okay? And many people miss over that. They miss
Wow.
that point. But if you read about the transition, the first thing they'll tell you is they got rid of all foreign influence. We have to operate from our DNA standpoint. And that's from our language, that's from our spiritual system and belief. We cannot operate from the foreigner's perspective. And that's the one thing that Africa is holding on to with dear life. And that's the one thing that's killing Africa.
Wow.
You have to know that. You have to know that. Even to give an example of the revolts during slavery, there was only one successful revolt, well, two, that led to independence of the people in the Western Hemisphere. And what marks them successful is that they denounce Christianity and they utilize African spirituality. And that is Haiti. Haiti was the only African country that refused Christianity, and they beat Napoleon. Nat Turner, Denmark Vesey, and all the others in the Americas that wanted to stage a revolt, they kneeled down and prayed to Jesus, and they were captured. You have to know what is your enemy. And this is what our leaders must know. Singapore, China, all of those other countries understood who their enemy was and the smiling face that it came with and how it crippled them. Africans tend not to understand that. When we understand who and what our enemy is and how they show up on Sunday to poison us Monday through Saturday, then and only then can we see the revolution and turn things around. But we're witnessing it in Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger. I think Togo had something recently.
No, I think it was Gabon. Gabon, south of Cameroon. They did a coup, but there's arguments that the coup wasn't like the other ones that happened before. But for sure, Niger, Burkina Faso, and what's the third one?
Senegal.
Yes,
Senegal
yes.
has a new president.
Oh yeah, the 45
New thought.
45-year-old. Yeah. Who would have thought?
Okay.
That's insane, yeah.
So we have to shake off, get the poison out of our system. We are poisoned. We are poisoned. We have to purge ourselves.
Wow.
And what does that mean? That means we have to be brave. That means that we have to stand strong in our conviction. When we get to the place of being convicted and knowing absolutely who our enemy is, how our enemy has infiltrated us, we have to be strong so we can take and reach out to the next person to strengthen them and strengthen the next community. We're seeing it happen before us. And that's why the New African Thought Youth Training Institute is important to come into fruition to help Africa along. Because this is what our ancestors want. Our ancestors want us to come back together for the purposes of healing collectively, for the purposes of coming to a new glory. Before the slave trade, Africa had a glory that the world came to study in Timbuktu, the first university in the whole wide world.
Yeah.
Africa had its glory. We can't go back to that old glory, but we can create and position ourselves to go into that new glory. Now, you mentioned Singapore. Singapore boasts itself of having the most millionaires in any country, right?
Yes.
Okay. They didn't get that because we just kneeling and praying to Jesus. No, they got that because they went to the drawing board and said, what can we do for our people?
True.
If our people are working, we want the average person to be a millionaire. We want the average person to have these things. So we're going to put policies in place that will benefit the people. The problem with Africa is the person in power is like, how can I benefit myself?
The opposite. They're asking the wrong question.
Right.
Therefore, the policies exemplified by the treaties that they had, the post-colonial treaties, like the rights to the mineral rights exemplified by all those contracts, meaning that those contracts were not there to help the local people benefit. It was just to enrich the leader and whoever their counterpart was on the other side. And that
exactly. So, like in the case of Sierra Leone sold 250 miles of their shoreline to, I believe it was, I would say Asian country. I think it was China, but I'll just say Asian country because
it is a sea. It says the sea country. I know about this specific one. It is China.
Okay, and for a few dollars.
For pieces of paper that are worthless.
Yes. Now, what is China going to do? He has that coastline. He's taking all the fish, making it a private beach that all the poor fishermen that used to gather fish there, now they can no longer go and cast their net. Now they have to go through the China market and buy the fish at a marked up price. That doesn't help the community.
No, it does not.
When they could have conglomerated all of the small fishermen into one big fisher company and get the fish and sell it to China.
Now the question is, why didn't they do that instead? What stopped them from?
Because they think folded money has value. They have not understood the value of the natural resources.
So the true wealth, and that's why I say, even sometimes I didn't do economics. I wasn't an economics major, but I know enough to know that the real economy is not the money, but is the goods and services. And of course, that requires the raw materials. So whatever it is that you start that industrial cycle with, whatever that is, that is the core. That's what drives the economy, the energy, the resources, the gas, the oil and gas, the plants that you harvest, the cocoa, the coconut, the oil, the plants, the vegetables, and the different materials that you can extract from the soil to make the iron ore, the silver. And that is what wealth really is. Again, in order for you to create that value chain, you need to extract it. Yes, sometimes you need to transform it, clean it, add value, and then sell that at a certain price and make some money. But ultimately, if you don't have that, then you don't have anything else, because that is the core, that is the foundation of this whole thing that we're calling the world industrial complex or the economy. And and I think that understanding is really missing, which is why I really admire the new leader of Burkina Faso, because he lays a lot of emphasis. When I hear him speak, I hear somebody, he's not an expert, but he understands the bottom line, that if you have a resource and if you're smart, you shouldn't just sell that resource at the extraction price. You could take some energy and do something to it and add value, and then you can sell it for 10 times the price. He understands that, and that's his philosophy, and that's what I like.
I have a colleague in Cameroon. She's a professor, and she has her land. And we were talking about the land one time. And, I always hear in Cameroon and Africa, oh, the poor farmer. And I said, what's poor about the farmer? I said, do you not know that the rich people in America became rich because of farming?
Land. Yeah, because of
The
farming.
whole slave trade was about farming. And when we had the Civil War and the Emancipation Proclamation declared all Negroes to be free and that they could no longer have slave labor, hence slavery, the South had to reconsider how would they go forward because their way of making money was growing crops and
Having us
exporting
do the
them.
work and then reap the benefits.
Yes. So what the New South did, they went into manufacturing. If they sold tobacco, now they roll them and make cigarettes. They found a new market. If they grew
Value add.
watermelon, now they make watermelon juice or watermelon something. They
Yeah,
reinvented themselves, and that's what Africa has to do. Africa has the
absolutely.
natural resources like Burkina Faso just did. They canceled all of the mining agreements with the
Yeah.
foreigners to give their people
Locals.
an
Yeah,
opportunity to be miners. Now they go on and refine the products and sell them back to the world because the same products that they
yeah,
want are the very products, that the world wants. They can take control and control that wealth. That's what our ancestors want for us. Because
that's what they wanted.
I tell you, when I lay my body down in the ground and I turn into some gold and I turn into some diamonds, I turn into oil, I turn into bauxite. I want my children and grandchildren and great grandchildren to enjoy my dust.
Wow,
Okay?
that is powerful.
When I
That
lay
is
my
so
body
profound.
down. Because think
Yes.
about it. Think about not too many years ago, I think it was Senegal had discovered oil. I mean, not oil, gold for the first time in their country. Hadn't been there, nobody had seen it, blah, blah, blah. All of a sudden it's there. That was their ancestors saying, here, son, here, daughter, I have something for you.
That's what they left
And they like,
behind.
oh, we don't know what to do with this, so let's let the white folks have it.
Oh man, that is so funny. Oh wow. So
It's simple. It's simple. When you put it in simple terms, it's like, huh? It's
yeah,
simple.
like
It's
duh,
not complicated at
that
all.
that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So your
So,
the African Roots and Heritage Foundation has like a set of events that they do every summer. And I think you have something coming up for Cameroon. Can you kind of tell us what you have planned and what the event is about and how to participate, so to speak?
okay. We have two programs coming up, actually three. But
Oh,
one is the YCL PDP, which is the Youth Cultural Language Preservation Discovery Program. And that program is designed for the youth 18 years and up. And what we do, we have an agreement with His Majesty Samuel David of Bapa in the Western region. And we're going to go into the region and explore the kingdom of Bapa. What we have found is that the kingdoms are the holders and keepers of the history, the language, the traditions, the rights, the marriage rights of Cameroon. And so we have been, how could I say, maltreated in the media. This is an opportunity for our own people to go and write and collect the data and present it to the world, thereby controlling our own narrative
narrative.
and
Yeah.
increasing tourism. So people like me that have DNA found in Cameroon, we know the places to go. We know the kingdoms that will accept us, that's willing to honor and respect us. So this is a research team of youth. If any youth want to participate anywhere from around the world, we usually have the program in August when most college students are out of school.
Mm-hmm.
They can go on our website, which is www.arhf.net, and click on Become a Member Volunteer. Click
Okay.
on that link, upload it with your CV, and we'll be in contact with you to let you know how you can participate and get you ready for the research, because the research is already really taking place, because we do research at the event and after the event, and produce our findings into an anthology.
Okay.
That's taking place August. The date hasn't been determined yet, but it will be in August of 2024. And then the next program is the DRP, the Diaspora Reconnection Program. And that's specifically for individuals who are in the diaspora and want to come back and reconnect with their roots in Cameroon.
So
During that
does it matter? Does it matter if you were born in the US or if you're just an African person living in the US and you want to go back?
Yeah, just anyone. It doesn't matter whether or not you are in the US, because we're talking about the entire diaspora, be it Jamaica, Bahamas, Colombia, Brazil, wherever your ship landed for you.
Right.
You're welcome to come on the trip. And again, the information is on the website at www.arhf.net. And then the third program, which is coupled inside of the DRP program, is our GDCS, which is our Global Day of Community Service. And that's going to be at the Kingdom of Oka to present to the kingdom the sewing machines. So
Okay.
those are the three programs that's coming up this fall. So that's the DPR program. The DRP program is October 4th through the 14th.
Okay.
So both people have asked from different countries to participate in the program. The pricing that I have is specifically from the US, but if you're interested in coming from the Zambia or South Africa or Brazil or Colombia, we can organize a special rate for you. If you are inside of Cameroon and you want to participate, again, we have a land package just for you. So the thing is to go online. I believe it says Diaspora Reconnection Program. Click on that link and it'll give you the information. You can fill out the application and submit a request, and I or my secretary will respond back to you.
Okay. Okay. That is awesome. That is awesome.
Okay, some final thoughts here. So, just real quickly, if you go to our website, the ARHF website, like Dr. Diop was just describing, this is the DRP program she was talking about. It's really in October. I think she was saying August, but I think it's October because that's what it says on here. Well, yeah, I think she did say October 4 to 14. Anyway, so this is the breakdown of the program for those of you that are interested. But what are my final thoughts? My final thoughts are that the love of self doesn't necessarily imply the hate of others, and being able to be grounded in some truth around who you are or where you come from seems to be very, very powerful and compelling. Because I find it's almost as if I find satiety, like psychological satiety, when I think about the fact that I know exactly where I'm from and I can put my finger on it. I know what tribe I belong to, what languages to speak, what foods to cook. And that gives you some level of grounding that you can hardly get some other way. And so I am thankful for that. And I hope every human that exists is able to find that same type of satiety. And I really hope you enjoyed this conversation. And if you did, please like and subscribe to this channel because I have a whole lot more coming. And oh boy, you're gonna love it. Thank you all for tuning in, and I'll catch you on the next one. Thank you. Bye bye, and have a good one.